Homeless teen gives his only jacket to a freezing old man. But what the old man said changed everything. The wind bit through his skin like knives, but Jaden didn't flinch. Not because it didn't hurt, because he was used to pain. Hunger gnawed at him. Loneliness followed like a shadow. But tonight, something else would tear his life apart. He spotted the old man on the bench near the closed bus stop, hunched beneath a flickering street lamp, his hands trembling uncontrollably, lips blue. His coat, if it could still be called that, was barely thicker than paper, soaked through by slush and snow. The old man looked ready to die. Jaden hesitated. He had only one possession left in the world that could be called his own, the jacket. Too big, threadbare, but it had saved him more nights than he could count. He looked at the old man again, and he made his choice. "Here, man," Jaden said, tugging the jacket from his shoulders. "You need this more than me." The old man looked up with cloudy, astonished eyes. You giving this to me?" Jaden nodded. "I got nowhere to go anyway. Might as well stay moving." The old man's eyes welled up with tears. "Son, you don't know what you've just done." Jaden shrugged, turning to walk off into the night. But the man called out again, and what he said next would change everything Jaden thought he knew about his life. Jaden hadn't always been homeless. Just 6 months ago, he'd had a small apartment in the Bronx, a single mom who worked double shifts, and a dog named Beans. Life had been hard, but not unbearable. Then his mom got sick. Really sick. Jaden had tried everything. Skipping school to work odd jobs, bringing home packets of cheap soup, and standing in food bank lines for hours. But the rent piled up. The medicine cost more than they had. And the world didn't wait for a 16-year-old kid trying to be a man. When she passed, there was no one left. No relatives. No second chances. One night, Jaden returned from the hospital to find a lock on their door and all their things dumped into the snow. Since then, the streets had been his world. Jaden learned fast how to spot danger, how to sleep with one eye open, how to fight for food in shelter lines. But kindness? That felt like a luxury long forgotten. So giving away his jacket that night? It wasn't about being noble. It was about doing one good thing before he vanished from a world that never seemed to see him anyway. He never expected the old man to follow him. "Wait," the man rasped, struggling to his feet. "Boy, what's your name?" Jaden turned, half annoyed, half surprised. "Jaden." "What?" "Jaden," the man's voice cracked. "You saved me." "Not really. It's just a jacket." "It's not just a jacket," the man said. "You gave up the one thing keeping you warm. No one's ever done something like that for me. Not in all my years." Jaden shook his head. "Yeah, well, years don't mean much out here. People forget fast." The man stepped closer, his eyes clearer now. "You remind me of someone." Jaden shrugged again, ready to leave. But the man reached into his ragged coat and pulled something out, a worn photograph, creased at the corners, of a young woman holding a baby boy. This was my daughter," he said. "And that's her son." Jaden barely looked at the photo until he did. Until the shape of the baby's face, the curve of the woman's smile, made something twist inside him. That's my mom," Jaden whispered. The world around him stopped. The wind stilled. The snow fell silently. The old man looked stunned. "You're her son?" Jaden stared at him. "She never talked about you. She said her dad left." The old man's lips trembled. "She was right. I did. I was young, angry, thought the world owed me something. I wasn't there when she needed me. I tried to come back. Too late." Jaden's fists clenched. "So what?" "I didn't know she had a son," the old man said softly. "Didn't even know she was gone. I've been looking for her for redemption, I guess. And then tonight, in the cold, I meet you." Jaden's throat burned. It was too much. Too fast. Too cruel. "You think that makes this better?" "No," the man said. "But maybe it means we don't have to be alone anymore." They sat at a diner hours later, the kind that never closed, huddled over cheap coffee. Jaden still didn't know what to feel. Anger, grief, hope. It mixed in his chest like poison and medicine all at once. The old man's name was Harold. He used to be a mechanic. Used to have a family. A life. Now, just like Jaden, he was another ghost drifting through the city. But something had changed between them. The photo. The jacket. The pain. Jaden wasn't ready to call him Grandpa. Not yet. But he didn't walk away either. "You got somewhere to go?" Jaden asked eventually. Harold shook his head. "Not anymore." Jaden sipped his coffee. "Me neither." Then, quietly, "Maybe we find somewhere together. And for the first time in months, Jaden didn't feel quite so cold. They spent the rest of that night in the corner booth of the diner, stealing warmth from mugs they couldn't afford to refill and speaking in fragments, like two people relearning how to use their voices. The waitress was kind enough to let them stay as long as they didn't sleep. Morning light filtered through the fogged-up windows, gray and uncertain. Jaden's eyes were heavy, but something about being near Harold kept him awake. He studied the old man across from him. Now that the shock had worn off, he could see the resemblance Harold's brow, his stubborn jawline, the same stormy eyes. "I don't know if I can believe it yet," Jaden admitted. "That you're really my grandfather." Harold nodded slowly. "I can't blame you. I wouldn't believe me either." Jaden ran his fingers along the edge of the photo again, the same one Harold had shown him the night before. "She never said anything. She never mentioned your name. She was protecting you," Harold said. "From me. I hurt her. Walked out when she was 15. I thought I'd be back, but I got into trouble drinking, fighting, jail time. By the time I tried to turn things around, she didn't want me near her." Jaden stared down at the cold coffee. "She died angry." "I know," Harold whispered. "I could feel it even without seeing her. That's why I've been sleeping on benches and under bridges. I didn't deserve comfort. Not after what I did." Jaden's throat tightened. "But you're here now." "I am," Harold said, voice cracking. "And so are you." The sun rose higher, and reality returned like a slap. The diner couldn't be home. They had no money, no plan, and the temperature outside was dropping again. Another storm was coming. Jaden pulled on his hoodie thin and ripped and stood. "We can't stay here." Harold grunted as he got to his feet. "Where to?" Jaden hesitated. "There's a church on 118th. Sometimes they give out blankets and sandwiches in the morning." They stepped back into the cold. The world didn't care that they had just discovered they were family. The snow fell, the wind howled, and people passed without looking. But this time, they walked together. At the church, they were given 2 peanut butter sandwiches and a small wool blanket. Jaden offered his half to Harold without thinking. "You sure?" Harold asked. "I've gone longer," Jaden replied. They sat on the church steps, chewing slowly. Silence stretched between them again, but it didn't feel empty this time. Harold looked up at the stone cross above the doorway. "When I was younger, I thought faith was for the weak. Turns out weakness finds you anyway." Jaden didn't answer. He thought of his mom, how she used to light candles and whisper prayers after midnight. She never stopped believing even when everything fell apart. "I think she would have liked that you're trying now," Jaden said quietly. Harold's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't let them fall. They found an old bus depot to hide from the snow that night. It wasn't much broken benches, cracked windows, and the constant roar of trains nearby. But it was dry. They huddled together under the blanket, back to back, trading body heat. Jaden thought he wouldn't sleep, but exhaustion won. He dreamed of his mother. She stood in their old apartment, cooking beans and rice, humming a song he barely remembered. When he asked where she'd been, she just smiled and said, "You're not alone anymore, baby." He woke up with tears running into his collar. Beside him, Harold was already awake, watching the street. "You okay?" he asked. Jaden wiped his face. "Yeah." But Harold didn't press. He just nodded. That morning, they scavenged. Jaden knew all the good spots. The corner deli that dumped expired muffins, the alley behind the Thai place where you might find leftover rice in styrofoam containers. They ate with frozen fingers and dirty hands. It wasn't glamorous, but it was survival. Around noon, they passed a community bulletin board outside the rec center. Jaden stopped. A flyer caught his eye. Winter shelter volunteers needed emergency housing available for families. He stared at it. "Families? Think we count?" he asked. Harold looked at him. "We're blood. That's something." So they went inside. The woman at the front desk was kind, but cautious. "You two are related?" Jaden nodded. "He's my grandfather. We just found each other." She scanned them both. "We've had a lot of people trying to game the system." Jaden bristled. "We're not lying." Harold stepped forward, holding the photo. "That's my daughter. She was his mother. She's gone now." The woman softened slightly. "All right. We can give you a spot for the night. Bunk beds. You'll have to share with 2 other families." Jaden didn't care. He'd slept in worse. They were shown to a shared room in the back. 4 bunks, faded yellow walls, and the smell of too many people and not enough space. But the blankets were clean, and the heater hummed. Jaden sat on the lower bunk, staring at the photo again. Harold took the top. It wasn't home, but it was safe. That night, Jaden lay awake, listening to the breathing of strangers. He thought about everything that had happened in just 2 days. From giving away his jacket to sitting under real blankets beside the man he never knew he needed. It was like a story someone else might live, but it was his. In the dark, Harold spoke. I was a coward when I left your mom. I don't want to be one again. Jaden turned over to face the ceiling. You're not. I want to fix things, Jaden. Help you. Be there for you. Jaden closed his eyes. Then don't leave. I won't. The next morning, something shifted. At breakfast oatmeal and toast, Jaden saw a man with a clipboard going bunk to bunk. Harold noticed him too. That's a social worker. Jaden tensed. He gonna split us up? Harold shook his head. Not if I talk to him first. He stood and walked over. Jaden watched from across the room, heart pounding. Minutes later, Harold returned. He wants to talk to both of us, he said. He might have a program. Jaden followed him into a small office. The social worker, Mr. Riley, was middle-aged, polite, and serious. I understand you two are recently reunited, Mr. Riley began. Jaden nodded. And you're both without permanent housing. Yes, sir, Harold said. Mr. Riley tapped his pen. We have a transitional housing program for family units. It's small, just 2 rooms available right now. But if you qualify, you could stay there while we help you get back on your feet. Jaden leaned forward. What do we have to do? Attend a few counseling sessions. Harold, you'd need to pass a background check. And Jaden, we'd enroll you back in school. School. Jaden hadn't thought about school in months. The idea felt foreign. Strange. But good? I can do that, he said. Harold nodded too. So can I. By the end of the week, they were moved into a small unit on the edge of town. It wasn't much, just 2 beds, 1 lamp, a broken TV, but it had a door that locked and a roof that didn't leak. Jaden stood in the doorway the first night, staring at the room. You know, he said, if someone told me last week I'd have a bed again, I would have laughed. Harold chuckled. If someone told me I'd find my grandson in the snow and he'd save my life, I would have walked the other way. Jaden smiled, just a little. Guess we're both idiots, huh? Best kind, Harold said. Weeks passed. Jaden went back to school. It wasn't easy. The other kids stared. He didn't have the right clothes. He wasn't caught up. But he tried. And slowly, things began to stick. Harold started working part-time at a garage nearby. He hadn't held a wrench in years, but the feel of it came back like muscle memory. At night, they ate dinner together. Cheap pasta, canned soup, sometimes even hot dogs. They shared stories, laughed, fought over the remote. They were learning how to be a family, one awkward day at a time. But just when things felt steady, the past knocked on the door. It started with a knock, firm, deliberate, and much too early for comfort. Jaden rubbed the sleep from his eyes, dragging himself toward the door in a t-shirt and mismatched socks. Harold had already left for his shift at the garage. Jaden figured maybe it was just the building manager checking on them again. But it wasn't. On the other side of the door stood a man in a charcoal suit, coat pressed, and hair combed like he'd walked out of a courtroom. He was holding a folder and a briefcase, and his eyes didn't blink. Jaden Carter? Jaden hesitated. Yeah. I'm David Monroe. I'm an investigator with Family and Child Legal Services. May I come in? Jaden's stomach dropped. His instincts screamed no, but he stepped aside. The man entered, eyes sweeping the room, bare mattress, pile of laundry, half-eaten cereal bowl. I'm sorry to interrupt your morning, Monroe said, pulling out a notepad. But we've received a formal inquiry into your current guardianship situation. A relative has come forward. Jaden froze. What do you mean? Monroe glanced at the file. A woman named Diane Carter. Claims to be your aunt, your mother's sister. Jaden's mind reeled. That's impossible. My mom didn't have any siblings. Well, Ms. Carter says otherwise. She's petitioning for full guardianship. Claims she's been looking for you since your mother passed. Jaden sat down hard on the edge of the bed. I don't even know her. She says she has paperwork, birth records, family ties. Whether or not you know her doesn't change the legal process. Jaden's voice came out smaller than he meant. But I live with Harold now. He's my grandfather. We know, Monroe said gently. And that's where it gets complicated. When Harold came home that afternoon, Jaden was still sitting on the bed, hands gripping the edge of the mattress so tight his knuckles turned white. Kiddo, Harold asked, putting down his lunch pail. You okay? Jaden looked up, his eyes hollow. They want to take me. What? Who? Jaden explained everything. Monroe, the so-called aunt, the guardianship claim. Harold sank into the chair beside him. I didn't know your mom had a sister either. She never mentioned one. Jaden's jaw clenched. What if it's all made up? What if she's just trying to collect some kind of check for taking me in? Harold sighed. We'll find out. Together. Promise, Jaden said, his voice nearly a whisper. Harold looked him in the eyes. Promise. I'm not losing you, Jaden. Not after everything we've come through. The next day, they were summoned to a hearing at the courthouse downtown. Jaden had never been inside a courtroom. It was colder than he expected, not just the temperature but the air. Like it had never known joy. Diane Carter was already seated when they arrived. She looked nothing like Jaden expected. Mid-40s, with red lipstick and a sharp business suit. Her expression was one of smug control, the kind that didn't leave room for empathy. When their names were called, Jaden stood beside Harold before the judge, his heart pounding in his chest. Diane stood on the other side. Ms. Carter, the judge said, adjusting his glasses, you claim to be the biological sister of the deceased, Melissa Carter? Yes, Your Honor, she replied smoothly. I have her birth certificate here. We were separated in foster care as children, and I've been looking for her for years. When I found out about her passing and discovered she had a son, I filed for guardianship immediately. Harold's fists clenched at his sides. The judge turned to him. Mr. Harold Jameson, you claim to be the maternal grandfather. Yes, sir. And what evidence do you have of your relationship to the minor? Harold pulled out the photo, the one of Melissa holding Jaden as a baby. This is my daughter. That's Jaden. I know I wasn't there when she needed me, but I found him. I've been taking care of him. He's not just a kid to Mayhay's family. The judge looked over the photo. There's no name or date on this. It's all I have, Harold said quietly. Jaden stepped forward. He's telling the truth. He's my grandpa. I didn't even know I had an aunt until yesterday. I don't want to go with her. Diane scoffed. He's a minor. He doesn't know what's best for him. I have a stable home. A full-time job. I can give him a future. Harold's voice cracked. I don't have much, but I'm giving him everything I've got. The judge raised a hand. That's enough for now. I'll review the documents and set a date for a final decision. Until then, Jaden remains in temporary custody with Mr. Jameson. Jaden exhaled. Just barely. Outside the courthouse, Diane approached them. Her eyes locked on Jaden. You're a smart kid. You don't belong in some rundown apartment with a has-been grease monkey. Think about your future. Jaden didn't respond. He turned and walked away with Harold. That night, they barely spoke. Jaden couldn't sleep. Every minute felt like it was counting down to something he couldn't stop. A week later, Monroe returned. He had paperwork this time. A DNA test order. Both Harold and Diane were to submit samples to determine who truly had the blood right to custody. Jaden was furious. So it doesn't matter what I want. Monroe looked at him. It does matter. But the court also needs legal clarity. If she proves she's Melissa's sister and Harold doesn't show biological ties, your preference won't be the only factor. Harold didn't fight it. Let's take the test. Whatever we need to do. Jaden agreed. But the weight nearly broke him. During the following week, the shelter program reached out again. Mr. Riley sat them both down. We're going to support you both, no matter the outcome, he said. But Jaden, have you ever considered a mentorship scholarship? Jaden blinked. What's that? It's a long-term program for kids who've been through homelessness or foster care. We pair you with a mentor, support your school life, and help you plan for college. But you'll need a stable legal guardian. Jaden looked at Harold. Riley smiled. If Harold wins custody, you could qualify immediately. Hope flared. Then it twisted. What if Diane won? Would she let him stay in the program? Would she even care? 3 days later, the results arrived. Harold sat on the couch, envelope in his lap, hands shaking. Jaden sat across from him, eyes locked on that thin white rectangle like it could destroy him. You want to open it? Harold asked. Jaden shook his head. You. Harold peeled back the seal. He read it, and didn't speak for several long seconds. Jaden stood. Well, Harold looked up slowly, eyes misted over. It says we're a 99.8% match. I'm your grandfather. Jaden didn't cry. He leapt into Harold's arms. They held each other tight, like neither of them would ever let go again. The final court hearing came and went. The judge ruled in Harold's favor. Diane didn't fight it. She just sneered, muttered something about raising someone else's problem, and walked away forever. Jaden never looked back. That night, back at the apartment, Jaden sat beside Harold on the edge of the bed. "I never thought I'd be part of something that mattered," he said. "But this feels like something real." Harold nodded. "You gave me another chance, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving I earned it." Jaden smiled. "I think Mom would be proud." 3 months later, everything had changed, but not in the flashy, miracle movie kind of way. There were no mansions, no lottery tickets, no long-lost millionaires coming to save the day. But sometimes, real change is slow, quiet, and earned. Jaden now had a regular school schedule. He was 2 grade levels behind, but he showed up every day. He was getting B's. Sometimes even an A. The teachers noticed. So did the counselor, who submitted his name for a leadership mentoring program. Harold kept working part-time at the garage, mostly tire changes and oil fixes. It wasn't glorious, but it gave him a purpose and it helped pay for dinner. They still lived in the transitional housing unit, but Riley had submitted a grant application that would cover a small rental for them soon. Maybe even a real apartment with 2 rooms, maybe even a window that didn't rattle in the wind. Jaden didn't need a lot. Just a roof, some books, and Harold's voice in the other room. That was enough. One evening, Jaden came home holding a crumpled envelope. "What's that?" Harold asked, stirring a pot of macaroni on the stovetop. Jaden didn't speak right away. He placed the envelope on the table, then carefully pulled out a folded letter. "I wrote this," he said, "for school. It was part of the mentorship program. A letter to someone who changed your life." Harold raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. Your math teacher." Jaden laughed. "Close." Then he unfolded the letter and read. "Dear Grandpa, before I met you, I thought the world didn't care if I disappeared. I thought kindness was something that only existed in movies, and family was just something people talked about on holidays. But then I gave away my jacket, and you gave me something back I didn't even know I had lost hope. You didn't just give me a place to stay. You gave me a reason to believe in people again. In myself. You call yourself broken, but you're the strongest person I've ever known. You messed up, yeah, but you never stopped trying to fix it. That's what love really is, I think. Not perfection, but persistence. You didn't save me with money or promises. You saved me by staying. And I'm proud to be your grandson. Love. Jaden." Harold didn't speak. He just stepped forward and pulled Jaden into a long, tight hug, his hand trembling slightly on Jaden's back. "I never thought I deserved a second chance," he whispered. "But maybe I was wrong." Jaden nodded. "Yeah, maybe we both were." A few weeks later, Jaden stood in front of a crowd of kids and adults in the city auditorium. It was the final ceremony for the mentorship program, and each student had to give a short speech. Jaden stepped up to the microphone. His palms were sweaty, his heart hammering. But he looked into the crowd and saw Harold, sitting in the 3rd row, wearing a button-up shirt that barely fit and a proud, nervous grin. Jaden took a breath. "My name is Jaden Carter," he began. "I used to think I was alone, that I didn't matter, that I was just another invisible kid in a big, cold city." A few people in the room nodded. They knew what that felt like. "But then I met someone who showed me something different. Not by giving me money, not by offering a fancy solution, just by showing up and not walking away." He swallowed. "My grandpa didn't raise me. He didn't even know me. But he gave me the first thing I needed, a reason to believe that maybe I deserved better." Jaden's voice cracked, but he kept going. "We don't get to choose who breaks us, but sometimes we get to choose who helps us heal." He looked right at Harold. "And I chose him." The room fell silent. Then applause broke out. Harold clapped harder than anyone. The months that followed were far from perfect. Harold got pneumonia that winter. Spent 6 days in the hospital. Jaden never left his side, sleeping in the chair and arguing with nurses like a professional. Jaden failed his first geometry exam but studied until 2 a.m. the next week and aced the retake. Sometimes the heater broke. Sometimes they argued. But every morning, they had coffee and toast together. Every evening, Harold asked about school, and Jaden asked about the old days in the garage. They were no longer strangers bound by blood. They were family built through choice, effort, and forgiveness. One snowy afternoon, as they walked past the park where they'd first met, Jaden slowed down. Harold looked over. "What's up?" Jaden pointed at the bench. "That's where you were. Shivering. Remember?" Harold smiled, brushing snow from the corner of the seat. "Hard to forget. I didn't think giving up my jacket would lead to anything," Jaden said. but I think it was the first real thing I'd done in a long time. It was brave, Harold said. Jaden shook his head. It was human. They sat down for a moment, watching snow drift through the wind. You know, Harold said softly, that night you gave me your jacket, I wasn't sure I was going to make it through the night. Jaden looked over. Why? I didn't just mean the cold, Harold replied. I meant life. Jaden was quiet. But you gave me a reason to keep breathing. Jaden nodded. And you gave me a reason to start living. Years later, Jaden stood outside a community center, a clipboard in hand and a dozen flyers tucked under his arm. He was 17 now, taller, with steadier eyes. He wore a clean hoodie and donated sneakers, and the staff at the shelter called him one of the good ones. He was starting a new volunteer program outreach for teens who'd fallen through the cracks. He called it the Jacket Project, because sometimes the smallest gesture, a warm coat, a gentle word, a seat at the table could change a life. And Jaden Carter knew that better than anyone. Back home, Harold was reading the newspaper at the kitchen table when Jaden returned. How'd it go? Harold asked. Good, Jaden replied, setting down the flyers. Got 5 sign-ups today. Harold nodded, proud. That's 5 more than yesterday. Jaden grinned. Exactly. He poured them both a mug of tea and sat across from Harold. You know, Jaden said, looking around the little kitchen, we're still not rich. Harold laughed. Nope. We still got bills. Plenty. And the roof still leaks sometimes. Especially when it rains sideways. Jaden leaned back. But this life? It's the best I've ever had. Harold reached across the table, his weathered hand resting over Jaden's. Same here, kiddo. Same here. Back home, Harold was reading the newspaper at the kitchen table when Jaden returned. How'd it go? Harold asked. Good, Jaden replied, setting down the flyers. Got 5 sign-ups today. Harold nodded, proud. That's 5 more than yesterday. Jaden grinned. Exactly. He poured them both a mug of tea and sat across from Harold. You know, Jaden said, looking around the little kitchen, we're still not rich. Harold laughed. Nope. We still got bills. Plenty. And the roof still leaks sometimes. Especially when it rains sideways. Jaden leaned back in his chair, steam rising from the mug in his hands. But this life? It's the best I've ever had. Harold didn't speak for a moment. Then he reached across the table, resting his weathered hand over Jaden's. Same here, kiddo, he said softly. Same here. They sat like that for a while, 2 souls once broken, now healing together not by fortune or fate, but by the simple, powerful act of choosing each other. Outside, the snow began to fall again. But inside their little kitchen, everything was warm. The rain was falling in sheets that day, soaking the sidewalks and flooding the gutters. Jaden adjusted the hood of his worn gray windbreaker and clutched the paper bag in his arm tighter. Inside was a ham sandwich, a juice box, and a folded flyer for the Jacket Project, his brainchild, now running strong into its 2nd year. He didn't know what pulled him to the underpass that afternoon. Maybe it was the way the cold wind seemed to whisper something familiar. Or maybe it was just habit. He always walked the long way home from school now, passing by the shelter, the soup kitchen, and the darker corners of the city where hope was in short supply. That's when he saw him. A kid maybe 12 or 13 curled up under the concrete bridge, his back against a graffitied pillar. He wore a t-shirt soaked through, shoes with holes in the toes, and jeans that looked like they hadn't seen a washer in weeks. His hair stuck to his face in wet clumps, and he was shivering violently. Jaden stopped. The memory came rushing back like a wave. The bench, the freezing air, the ache of hunger, the sense that not a single person would care if he disappeared that night. Jaden stepped forward. Hey, he called out gently, crouching down a few feet away so he wouldn't scare the kid. The boy flinched, his head snapping up. His eyes were wide, animal-like, filled with a fear Jaden knew too well. It's okay, Jaden said quickly, holding up a hand. I'm not a cop. I'm not trying to make you go anywhere you don't want to go. The boy didn't say anything, just kept staring. Jaden reached into his bag and slowly pulled out the sandwich and juice box. You hungry? The boy's eyes darted to the sandwich, then back to Jaden's face. I didn't do anything, he said finally. His voice was raspy. I'm not a thief. I know, Jaden said. You're just cold, and wet, and hungry. The boy hesitated, then took the sandwich with trembling hands. He unwrapped it clumsily and took a bite like he hadn't eaten in days. Jaden sat down beside him on the damp concrete. I'm Jaden, he said. I used to live under a bridge too. The boy chewed slowly, his eyes flicking toward him. Yeah, right. I'm serious, Jaden said, pulling down his hood. 2 years ago, I gave away my last jacket to someone freezing on a bench. That night, I thought I was going to die. But instead, I found something better. The boy's chewing slowed. You homeless? Was, Jaden nodded. Now I live with my grandfather. We run a program to help kids like us. The boy wiped his mouth with his sleeve. Name's Milo, he muttered. Been on the streets for about a month. Jaden nodded. That's a long month. Milo stared at the rain. Foster home kicked me out. Said I was too much trouble. Nobody wanted to take me again. I got tired of bouncing around. So I ran. Jaden looked down at the folded flyer in the bag. He pulled it out and offered it to Milo. This is us. The Jacket Project. It's not a shelter exactly, work with those. But we've got food, hot showers, lockers, a place to charge your phone. Adults who don't talk down to you. You don't have to stay forever. You don't even have to talk if you don't want to. Milo took the flyer slowly. What if I don't believe in people? Jaden smiled sadly. Then we'll believe in you. Until you're ready. That night, Milo didn't show. Jaden went to bed restless, staring at the ceiling, hoping he hadn't scared the kid off. But the next morning, just as Jaden was finishing his breakfast shift at the center, the front door creaked open. Milo stood there, dripping wet, flyer crushed in one hand. Jaden stood slowly, heart lifting. Hey, he said. You made it. Milo didn't speak. Jaden didn't push. We've got eggs today. Scrambled. Want some? Milo gave the smallest nod. Jaden led him to the counter, handed him a tray, and watched as the staff gently welcomed him. No questions, no judgment. It was the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Jaden saw a version of himself in Milo, wary, guarded, quick to snap back if anyone got too close. But he also saw something else, a flicker of fire in the boy's eyes, a hunger to be seen, to be wanted. Jaden taught him how to clean up in the shared bathroom, how to navigate the food schedule, and eventually how to help others. Milo started folding towels in the laundry room. Then he handed out snacks. Then, one day, he told another new kid where the clean socks were kept. That night, Jaden caught him smiling when he thought no one was looking. One chilly afternoon, as they sat outside the center drinking hot cocoa from paper cups, Milo asked, "Why did you give that guy your jacket?" Jaden looked up at the clouds. Because he looked like he had nothing. And I felt like I had nothing too. But doing that made me feel like I had something to give. Like I wasn't just invisible. Milo was quiet. Then he said, I think I want to give someone something someday. Jaden grinned. You already are. A month later, Jaden helped Milo enroll in school again. It wasn't easy, nothing about re-entering the system ever was. There were forms, suspicion, adults who whispered run away, like it meant lost cause. But Jaden showed up at every meeting. Harold did too. Even bought Milo a secondhand backpack and told him stories about fixing engines to keep him entertained. Slowly, Milo's walls began to fall. Then one day, Milo came to Jaden with a folded piece of paper. I want to write a speech, he said. Like you did. You know when you talked about Harold at that event. Jaden took the paper, unfolding it carefully. The handwriting was messy. The words were simple. But the heart? The heart was huge. I used to think being alone was better, because then nobody could hurt you. But being alone all the time hurts anyway. Then someone gave me a sandwich and sat in the rain with me. Didn't ask for anything back. Didn't treat me like a problem. Now I'm not alone anymore. I don't have a big family. But I've got a name on the wall of this place. A bunk. A toothbrush that doesn't get thrown away. I think that's what home is. Not just four walls, but a place where someone's waiting for you. Thanks, Jaden. Jaden folded the paper again, his throat too tight to speak. Milo spoke at the next fundraiser for the Jacket Project, and that night, they raised enough to open a second center across town. Jaden stood in the back of the room, tears in his eyes, pride swelling in his chest. This wasn't just a success story. It was a full-circle moment. The jacket had been his last act of selflessness as a broken boy. But now it was the seed of a legacy. That night, walking home, Harold put a hand on Jaden's shoulder. You saved him, kiddo, he said. Jaden shook his head. No, I just met him in the rain. He saved himself. Harold smiled. Maybe, but you reminded him that people are worth saving. Jaden looked up at the sky, stars blinking through the clouds. Sometimes I think about that night, he said. The bench, The cold. If I hadn't stopped, hadn't given up the jacket. Harold chuckled. You'd still be stubborn. Still kind. Still mine. Jaden laughed. Yeah, still yours. They walked on. And behind them, in a small brick building with a flickering sign, the lights of the jacket project glowed warm against the dark.